So up next, I'd like to welcome Caryn Kopp of Kopp Consulting back to Galleria. You might remember Caryn from last year. She's an author, nationally recognized speaker, and contributor to magazines such as Forbes and Fortune and Newsweek. She's been called the chief door opener because she gets clients in the door with their prospects. Today, she's going to be sharing her proven secrets to accelerate sales by leveraging your relationships. Caryn, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Wow, what an incredible power-packed last hour as I've been watching. Kudos to everyone.
Fantastic. Hey, well, the floor is yours, and we'll circle back with some Q&A in just a little bit.
All right, we're going to share the screen. Hang on, everybody. Here we go. Okay, so thanks for having me back, everybody. It is an action-packed hour and a couple of minutes with Chris and myself on how to accelerate sales by leveraging your relationships. Now, hang on just one second. Let me make sure the slideshow is going. There we go. That's better. Now, everybody is here because they're getting outcomes. So we're not talking about creating outcomes. We're talking about creating optimal outcomes. Everybody on this call is busy. In this industry, it is very difficult to find time for business development. We talked about that last year when I was here, and we were talking all about in the pandemic, what do you do? Now we're post-pandemic and everybody is busy. So what do you do to create optimal outcomes, not only with the time you're spending on business development, but on the time you're spending with your current clients? A couple of sales truths that are important for us to talk about. The first one is, hey, it's easier to sell more to current clients, right? It's just easier. And it's faster to sell more to somebody who's been referred to you than it is to get in the door. Now, I'm not saying don't get in the door with new clients. Don't hear that from what I'm saying. I'm just saying your clients can be wonderful prospects too. But the thing is, when I talk about this and I say this and everybody nods their heads and says yes, and then I ask them, are they doing that as often as they could be? Are you selling more to current clients as often as you could be? And often people will say, well, not really. And I say, are you always asking your clients for referrals? And people will say, well, not really. So let's have a moment of just self-reflection. Are you doing both of these as often as you could be doing? Because you may be able to, with a question or two, double or triple the size of an order. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And if you're not, why not? A lot of times when I ask people why they're not doing it, they tell me either they're just too busy to add that part of it in, or sometimes they tell me even though they should be asking for referrals to other people from their clients, they don't really know what to say to ask that question to get the referral. So what we're going to do today, and I've talked with Chris about this and Louise about this, so what we're doing today is I'm going to share a tool that I recently developed, actually since I saw you last. I've developed this tool that will help organize these activities into a simple format that you can keep with you often. It focuses on an individual client and then expands the sphere around them. And these are items that you could fit right into your current workflow. It's not this big extra project business development. It's going to fit right into your workflow. So I'm going to share that tool with you, and then I'm going to give you a bunch of tips for efficiencies when selling to your current clients, as well as when getting referrals to others that your clients will refer you to. But let's face it, it all starts with the prospect or the client. So let's put up a picture. And we might have talked about this last year, so let's just revisit this. What do you think this lady is thinking about? This is a decision maker within a company, somebody to whom you want to sell, or it could be a current client. What is she thinking about? Well, if you ask me, I don't know. It could be what she's going to order from Starbucks. It could be, wow, she just got confirmation on some pretty big weekend plans. It could be any one of those things. But what is she not thinking about? Well, she's not thinking about you. She's not thinking about returning your call. She's not thinking about answering your email. She's not thinking about what promotional items she's going to order next. She's not thinking about those things. She's thinking about herself and what is going to make her life easier. So there are some faulty assumptions that have to do with business development that all of us get caught in. But let's put these just out on the table. The first one is that your clients are going to call you if they need you. That's a faulty assumption. They may mean to call you, but they get a call from your competition while they're waiting for their call from you because your cadence is too far from one point of contact to the next. And I can tell you, my base business is door opening. We get the door open for our clients. We support several companies in the promotional products industry. And as we're calling in and we're securing these meetings with new prospects for our clients, we are always asking the prospect, what do you have on your desk that we can help you with? Sometimes they just haven't had a chance to call their current vendor. And then we scoop in there and have the conversation, and we can take that business that way. That's why it's always a good idea to never assume they're going to call you if they need you. There should always be a next step and a date and time with every step of the sales process, not just with your prospects, but with your clients too. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Another faulty assumption is that they're going to inform you of changes that are happening. Because remember, they're thinking about themselves. They're not necessarily thinking about you. When we get a door opener program started for one of our clients, we always interview our clients' clients. And we ask our clients' clients, why did they say yes to an initial meeting? What was happening in their world? When we do that, we always ask our clients' clients, does our client have 100% of your business? And we listen for that response because often people will think that, yeah, they have 100% or close to 100% of their client's business. And they're always surprised to hear when they don't. So what we asked this one, it was in the display industry. And we asked our client's client, does our client have 100% share of your business? And his client's client said, well, you know what? No, they don't. Because a year ago, we acquired an international division, and that division had a relationship with a different vendor, and they've just continued working with them. Well, that's a problem for a couple of reasons. First of all, my client didn't know about it, and he and his wife pre-pandemic had dinner with this client every single quarter. And yet this had never come up. Why? Because he didn't ask. He didn't ask, what has changed in your world since we had dinner last? If he did ask that, he might have known that there was a new international division and there was another vendor in the mix. Listen, another vendor in the mix could mean that that vendor could take over his business and ruin his position with a client that he's had for a long time. So they will inform you of changes is a faulty assumption. And also that they know what they need. Just as your world has changed in the last year and a couple of months, well, so has your client's world changed as well. What do they need now from you that they might not have needed before? What can you look out into their world and say, hey, listen, there's an idea I have for you that might really help to meet your new goals now that your goals have changed. They don't necessarily know what they need. So when I say this, many times in promotional products, people will say to me, well, they may not have a budget for it. Of course they don't have a budget for it. It's a new idea. Budget's a funny thing. Budget can come from a lot of different places. When I worked in corporate before I owned this company, I was a brand manager. So I've sat on both sides of this promotional products desk. And as a brand manager, I couldn't go outside my total budget, but within my budget of advertising, trade shows, promotions, and packaging and all the other things, the sub budgets that I had, I could freely move money from one bucket to the next. Sampling was another. I could freely move money from one bucket to the next. I just couldn't go outside the budget unless I had a really good idea and threw it up the ladder and made a proposal to get money from a slush fund, which many corporations will have for really good ideas. So these are the faulty assumptions that sometimes keep us from having our world of opportunity and the ability to sell more to our current clients by just asking some additional questions and offering some additional ideas. So why is it really great to sell more to your current clients? Well, one is company growth, not just for Geiger, but for yourselves as well. Solidifying your position, like as in the example that I just told you about with our client. Personal gain. Hey, let's face it, many of us are in this to earn some money so that we can do the things we want to do with our lives. And if we sell more by just asking one question, that's personal gain. But okay, there are many people who may just be altruistic and they just want to create value for clients. That's great. This is another way you can create value for clients by offering them some ideas and suggestions that may elevate them in the minds of their supervisors. Our prospects and our clients go to work for a reason. Many of them want to be promoted. They want their bonuses. They want their raises. They're going to be reviewed at the end of the year. How is it that what you do can help them to get the spotlight in their own companies so that they can achieve some of their personal goals? It's important to think that part through as well. What value can you create for them as individuals, aside from creating value for their companies, so that they can attain their goals as well? So what I'm going to show you now, we're going to move into the section where I'm going to show you this tool that I've created. We're going to spend time there with this tool, so don't get frustrated. We're going to go through it step by step by step. And then I'm going to share it with Louise. She's going to share it with all of you so that you can use it's a fillable form, and you can use this as an exercise for yourselves as well. When we get started with this, it's going to be really helpful for you to think about one client of yours. So I want you to close your eyes for just a second and think about one client to whom you want to sell more. This is a person who could be buying more, or the company that this person works for could be buying more from you, but isn't yet. Think about this person as you're closing your eyes. Picture this person's face. You might have seen it on LinkedIn or in some of your research if you haven't met this person in person. This is one of your clients. It's an individual. What's this person's first name? What's the person's last name? Do you know the hair color? Do you know the eye color? Have this person's name in your mind as I take you through this example. And then when you're done with today, and I know you're getting a lot of information today, but when you're done with today, promise me that you will use the form that you're going to get and do the exercise at least once with this client that you have in mind, okay? So I'm going to turn the page. I'm going to show you what this form looks like. I'm going to take you through the whole form, give you lots of examples, and then we're going to move on to some tips that will make your life easier through the rest of this year. Okay, here it is. On the left-hand side of this form, we have accelerating sales by leveraging relationships internally. That's internal to your client's company. And on the right-hand side, it's external, outside of the client's company. We're going to go through each of these forms separately, but about one individual. So this form is for one individual. If you want to do one for another client of yours, you're going to have a second form. That's how this works. All right, here we go. So I chose, just as an example, a client named Goldie H. This is a fictitious client. Why is her name Goldie? Because she's going to lead to the gold. And she works for a company called Big Bucks Inc. because this is going to be about big bucks. All right, so this is a fictitious client. Now, what do? The very first thing you're going to do is we're going to focus on the top portion and identify all the other people internally within Goldie's company that I am not yet selling to, but I should be. Okay, so here they are. There's brand A. That's Jim. Brand B is Kathy. Brand C is Rhonda. The CEO's assistant also buys promotional items. Her name is Vicky. The facilities person is Tom. Sales is John. HR is Ron. And you get the idea, right? And there could be some other departments here that you're not currently working with, events, whatever. So those are the names that would go there. Anybody who should be a client of yours because they represent the size of opportunity that you are looking for and feel some sort of urgency. They may be buying from someone else, and that's just fine. They may need something and they don't yet buy it. that's also an opportunity for you. So the step one is to identify all the people internally in the company that surround your client who should be clients of yours. They represent mutually exclusive buckets of money. And yes, purchasing may need to be on there depending on the kind of company that you're selling to. And in other kinds, you won't need to deal with that. All right. So now we're going to come down to the chart, and I'm going to tell you how to use the chart in order to sell more. So if you want to sell more, you need to ask yourself 3 important questions. What else? Who else? And what's the big idea? I'll say that again. What else? Who else? And what's the big idea? If you want to sell more, you want to ask yourself those 3 questions as they relate to a single client of yours. Okay, so let's put Goldie right here. So follow the yellow highlight because there's going to be a lot of information on this page. So follow along with me. Yellow highlight. So here we have Goldie H. What else can Goldie H buy from me that she is not currently buying? So there's a lot of different ways you can approach that. It could be ancillary products to the product that you sold her. It could be multiple orders as time goes on. It could be that you're going to take those multiple orders and ask her to put that into one big order so you have it now and protect your position so that she may not go and buy the second order from someone else. There are a lot of different ways that you can approach what else can you sell to Goldie. Also, what would you suggest that she needs based on her career goals, based on what she's going to be reviewed on this year? What can you suggest to her? That's the first thing. So you're going to make a long list of everything that is in the what else column for Goldie. Then you're going to go to who else. So here's all the who else. Let's put this in there. Okay, here's all the who else from the top part of the form. And you're going to be doing this work. So if you ask, and a lot of people do this, they will ask somebody, who do you know who I should be talking to? And the person often can't think of anybody. So if you do this research ahead of time and you know who is in the position that you need to be introduced to, then you can make those suggestions. Well, I read that brand A is doing this out in the market, and that made me think an introduction to Jim might be a really good idea. Would you connect me by email with Jim? And then the other person with that level of specificity could say, yes, you're right. Jim is doing that. I'm going to go ahead and make that introduction. When you make the introduction, or when that person does, it's going to be super helpful if you provide that person, your client, with a 3 to 5 sentence blurb that this person can just cut and paste into an email introduction. Email introduction is my favorite way of doing this. Why? Because you maintain control over the communication. If somebody says, oh, I'm going to refer you to Jim, well, that's nice, but it's not great because then you lose control of that communication. If instead you say, would you mind connecting me by email? What that does, the email introduction, it puts you on it, it puts Jim on it, and now you have permission to communicate with Jim. And because Goldie did that for you, it's creating an implied endorsement. So ask for the email intro, but when you do, provide a 3 to 5 sentence blurb. And I don't mean 100-page PowerPoint deck. Please don't do that because nobody wants to go through that on an introduction like this. 3 to 5 sentences as to why it makes sense for Jim to connect with you. And then you say, thank you, Goldie. Hello, Jim. And then ask for a date and time to speak with Jim. And that's what starts the momentum with that. All right, that is the who else. Now let's go to the next part of this, which is the big idea. So the big idea takes a little bit of time to think through. And while I was on the earlier part of your program, I was hearing about kidding and all of those great big ideas. So yes, it does take a little bit of extra time to think it through, but boy, is it worth it when they say yes. So I'm going to take you through an example of someone in the promotional products industry pre-pandemic who came to me with this opportunity of a client of his who asked for 1,000 t-shirts. And he said to me, you know what, Caryn, this guy's name was Tom. He said, you know what, Caryn, my client John just called me and asked for 1,000 t-shirts for a walkathon. Now this was pre-pandemic, but the example still applies. And he asked for the 1,000 t-shirts, but I know that there's more. I just know that there's more. And can you help me think it through? So I said to him, as I'm saying to you guys now, this is the 3 questions. You want to sell more to your current clients? You ask 3 questions. What else? Who else? And what's the big idea? Okay. So I said to him, all right, so 1,000 t-shirts and it's for a walkathon. What else could you sell? What to John? And he said, well, they usually do 3 walkathons in the course of the year in different geographies. And I said, do you think they need t-shirts for that too? And he said, yeah, they send 1,000 people each time to these walkathons. And I said, okay, well, that's 3,000. Do you think he'd say yes to that? And he said, well, he might have an objection. He might be concerned that he'd have to warehouse the t-shirts. So I said to him, all right, well, what will you do about that? And he said, well, I can offer that we could warehouse the t-shirts for him. I said, that's a good way to take that objection off the table. So what we want to do is we want to pre-think the objections and with language be able to get the objection off the table, or at least think it through before the objection is voiced. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later. All right, so now we have not just 1,000 t-shirts, we have 3,000 t-shirts, and a good reason why the prospect, John, should say yes to that. So then I said, okay, what else? What else could you sell to John that John would value? And he said, well, in the walkathon, it might be really helpful if the walkers had a drawstring bag to keep their items in, and also water bottles. And I said, okay, great. Well, if he says yes to that, you not only have 3,000 items, you then have another 6,000. So that's 9,000, which is a whole lot better than 1,000. So we're on the right track. And I said, what else? And then he said, you know what? I think that is a good set of ideas for John for this. And I said, all right, well, then let's move on to who else. Who else in the organization do you need to meet who you don't already know? And he said, I'm going to need to put a list together so that I can ask John about that. I said, great. So now let's move over to the big idea. So think about something that is a really big idea. What's the big idea that you can go to so that not only you're not just doubling or tripling the size of the sale, you're going to just maybe 10x it or more. That's what I like to think about. And he said, well, he's never going to have the budget for that. But remember, I said earlier, budget's a funny thing. If somebody wants a budget for something, they may be able to reallocate dollars, or they may be able to go ask a different department for dollars, or they may be able to go to that slush fund that many companies have and ask for that money. So budget's a funny thing. So I said to him, let's not let that be a roadblock. Let's think of something that's really a big idea. And so he started thinking, and he said, you know what? There's a memo from the CEO of the company on the website for this company that talks about their theme this year being teamwork and camaraderie. And he said, that makes me think that with the other employees who aren't going to be part of the walkathon, that they may be able to have a t-shirt to wear on the day of the walkathon in support of the people who are walking. I thought that was a great idea. So he made his communication plan. He called John for a time to talk him through these ideas. And then John went for the 3 walkathons all at the same time. He went for the drawstring bag and the water bottle idea, not a problem. And then when it came to the big idea, and he did ask for who else, and John was going to get back to him about that. But then when it came to the big idea, one of the things I want to tell you about is really important how you present the big idea. You want to leave the portion of the conversation of the what else and the who else, and let the prospect know that what you're going to say next is going to be a big idea. And I have a little language library that I put together for you, and we'll include this when we send along the fillable form. But with this one of the things you could say is, hey, I've been thinking about you and your goals, and I have this out there idea. which I really think is going to help you to make an even bigger impact and more valuable impact. Are you ready to come out of the box with me so I can present this big idea to you? And so when you say that, it readies the prospect or your client to know that something different, something really out there is coming and they should get ready for it. So then when your client says, yeah, lay it on me, then you can say, well, you know how your CEO really wants camaraderie and teamwork this year? It was even on a memo that's posted on your website. And they say yes. And then you lay this idea out for them. So when Tom did that with John, he laid this whole big idea out. John sat back for a second and he said, you know what? This is brilliant. We have 10,000 people in our company. Wouldn't it be amazing if the 7,000 who didn't walk in the walkathon were wearing shirts in support of the people who do? Think about the camaraderie and teamwork that we can leverage to take advantage of that. I think there's even a spirit award that I might win if I do that. So he said, okay, great. And then he said, but the issue is I don't have the budget for that. And so Tom was ready for that objection. And he said, you can guess what he said? Who does? And so John sat there and thought about it. And he said, you know who does? Actually, Ron in HR. He's the one with the budget for that. Let's get him on the phone. So John got him on the phone and presented the idea. Ron thought it was great, said yes. And they all got off the phone. And so we had 3,000 plus 6,000 pieces, plus the 7,000 pieces, which winds up to be 16,000, if my math is correct, versus just 1,000, which he would have had he just responded to the initial request of 1,000 t-shirts. So yes, it took a little bit more time to think about the what else and to think about the big idea and to ask the questions and to present it. But boy, was it worth it. It made an enormous splash. So even if just a couple of your clients say yes to the big idea when you suggest it, it could more than 10x your sales this year. So on the left-hand side, we have the leveraging the internal relationships for one particular client of yours inside the company. Now we're going to move over to the other side, to the right-hand side, where we're going to be talking about the same person. So here's Goldie H, Big Bucks Inc., and we're going to be talking about how to be introduced or referred to the people Goldie knows outside of the organization. So you might be thinking, oh, personal relationships and maybe some professional association. Yes, all of those things, but there's a methodical way to think this through. Just like on the left-hand side of this form, we're going to be thinking it through very methodically on the right-hand side of the form too. So let's fill this in with a couple of ideas. All right, so going on the top left up here, the industry association. So let's say Goldie is a marketer. Well, there's the American Marketing Association, where Goldie may know other people like her who work for other companies. There could also be an industry association that's particular to her industry niche. Let's say it's construction, and Big Bucks Inc. is a construction company. Well, she may be involved in an industry association where other people just like her congregate. Well, you want in on that, right? Because if you can be in on that and Goldie can introduce you around, that is a very strong referral to people who may need exactly the kinds of things that Goldie does as well. So we want to get that on the list. Then the previous company. People oftentimes forget about the previous company. Well, Goldie likely worked somewhere else before, and now she's at the company where you know her from. She may be able to introduce you to whoever took over her position before. And there could be 3 or 4 different people at that organization who need to know you as well, if you ask. So you need to be able to put this down in an organized, methodical fashion. Let's talk about some others. Mentors and coach. People often will have either a mentor, an unpaid mentor, or a coach. And those people often know people who are in exactly the same position as Goldie. Outside trainers. Goldie might have taken, who knows, and if she's working with you, she might need to have taken a negotiations class. She may have taken a efficiency class. She might be taking a productivity class. Well, there may be other people within other companies who have a need also that she could refer you to based on that. And then let's come up here for vendor number 1, 2, 3. What I mean by vendor, there could be a SaaS platform with an account manager who may also be working with other companies like Goldie's, who you may need to know. So you can say to Goldie, listen, it's really important as you have a team of people around you supporting you that I know who they are, they know who I am, so that we can support you better. Would you mind connecting me by email with the person who represents your SaaS platform that you're using, or the person who did the training that you last went to? This is a little bit about how you can ask for these kinds of referrals. So this is very different and much more specific than just saying to somebody, can you refer me to someone you know who might need promotional items? Very, very different and very specific. Sales is very much about specificity. The more specific you can be with somebody, the more they can help you. If you're very specific, we work with other companies in construction that don't compete with you. Would you be so kind as to introduce me to the marketer over at company A and company B with whom you work? And then Goldie might say, sure, I'm happy to do that. And you can ask to be connected by email. So the more research that you could do ahead of time, so you have a specific ask, the easier it's going to be for your client to say yes and get that done. Now remember that 3 to 5 sentence blurb. Well, that's really important because somebody who doesn't know what to write about you, they may want to make that introduction for you, but they don't know what to write. So the introduction doesn't happen. It sits there and it sits there. And then it can become very uncomfortable for you to remind the person who said they'd be happy to introduce you to actually do so. So when you send that 3 to 5 sentence blurb, they can just cut and paste that. And it's also a little gentle reminder to make sure that they do it. Now, if they still don't do it, and I know people have said that to me, that they've reminded the person who promised to refer them and then the referral didn't happen. One of the ways I like to do that gently is I'll say, I'm putting this to the top of your inbox, and I'm so grateful that you'll do the referral by email. Thank you so much. And that will sometimes remind them to actually get that done. All right, so now that we've made a list of all the people who surround Goldie H, to whom you want to be introduced. And remember, you want to be choosy about who you want to be introduced to because your time is tight. I get it. So out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or so folks that we have up on here, you may only want 3 of those introductions. So if you don't want all the other introductions, don't put them down on the chart. You only want the ones where it's going to make sense for you because they have a big enough need for what you want to sell to make them an A-level client. Let's be really choosy about where we spend our time. All right, let's come to the middle of the page here where it's new, re-engage, and refer. So some of the people who Goldie knows are going to be brand new to you. Some of them you may have met, but you haven't been in touch with them for quite some time. It's time to re-engage. And others, you may be constantly in communication with them, but you haven't gotten a referral from them ever, or you haven't gotten a referral from them recently, and you want to change that. All right, so let's talk about how to get that done. Okay, here we go. So under new, the industry association, you don't know anybody there. You've never had connection with them. The person who replaced Goldie at her previous company and the mentor or coach. These are people you don't yet know, and you're asking for that email introduction. Re-engage. So let's say the outside trainer, you also took that negotiations class a couple of years ago, and you know the person who ran the class, but you haven't been in touch with that person. You can send an email and just let that person know directly. You don't even need to ask Goldie for this, but you can send that person an email and say, it's been a while since we've connected. Things have changed in my world. They've likely changed in yours. Let's schedule time for a virtual cup of coffee. Here are 3 times that work for me. Pick the one that works for you. You can send that as an email and then follow up with a phone call. We're going to be talking about phone calls versus emails in a little bit. And then maybe the vendor number 1 from the SaaS platform, maybe you knew that person a couple years ago, but you haven't been in touch with them. Same thing. Let's get re-engaged and have that virtual coffee. And then for those people, let's say vendor number 2 and vendor number 3, these are people you interact with all the time, haven't gotten a referral from them. One of the best ways I know to springboard the referral process is to refer to someone else. Now, if you don't know what they're doing lately, you can ask for that virtual cup of coffee, the same as with the folks that you're going to re-engage. But after that, what you're going to want to do is refer somebody to them. It doesn't always have to be a client that you refer to someone. You can refer a resource. Maybe they're looking for some information, or maybe there's a center of influence that they want to meet. And sometimes I'll even say to somebody, I'll say, who do you want to meet? And they'll tell me who they want to meet. And I may either know somebody like that, or somebody I know knows somebody like that. So I can either directly connect them, or I connect them with somebody who's a center of influence, and they can take it from there. But what typically happens is once you start referring somebody to someone else, they will feel obliged to refer somebody to you. And you can always follow that up with a phone call and find out how it went when you did your referral. And so that once you have this all put together, my recommendation is take this and print it out. Yes, the old-fashioned way. I'm not saying don't use your CRM. Yes, use your CRM. But this, I recommend print this out and put this up on your wall. Because in your CRM, it's 3 clicks away to remind you that when Goldie calls, here are the things you want to ask Goldie. The next time you need to reach out to Goldie, here are the things that you want to talk to Goldie about. If you already have done that thinking, and it doesn't take more than 10 minutes maybe to go through this entire process with any one person, you put that up on your wall, and then you make it part of your ongoing workflow. That's the important part. What I don't want to do is create this enormous extra project for you. Like sometimes prospecting can feel that way, although prospecting is very important, and make sure that you're spending time prospecting to get into net new also. But this can go into your workflow. So it doesn't need to be this whole extra project for you. So what you're going to get as part of this, and then we're going to move on to how this is going to work in your workflow, and then a bunch of tips for efficiency. You're going to get this exact form filled in the way it is currently, so you see the example. And then you're going to get a blank one so that you can fill in and use that for your clients. And remember, I asked you to promise me that you would do it for at least one of your clients, is to create this chart, put it on your wall, and get it done. Because sometimes it's just a matter of a question or two, which will end up double, triple, or maybe even 10xing the size of your sales with any one client. So it could be true that you may not be able to get 100% share of sale with any one client, but boy, can you be close if you methodically and strategically go through an exercise like this as developed for you, so that it can be easy for you to go through this kind of an exercise. All right, so the next thing people tell me is, okay, Caryn, but I don't have time. I understand you said I can fit this into my workflow, but I'm not exactly sure how that works. Here's a couple of ideas for you. Okay, when you are scheduling your projects, also schedule a date and time. So instead of just answering the email that says, I need 1,000 t-shirts, get a date and time to talk about the 1,000 t-shirts and some of the specifics, and ask the questions. And there's a whole article on my site about the questions, we call them high gain questions, that you can ask when somebody asks you for something, as opposed to just whipping back a response that doesn't give you the ability to ask the the what else, who else, and present your big idea. So when you're engaged in a project, you want to schedule time in the middle of the project, of course, to make sure how's it going. And then after the project is finished, to make sure that they were satisfied, but that's on their side. But on your side, to talk about what's next and the what else do they need, and to ask the who else questions, and even to present a big idea. If you always have a date and time on the calendar for the next step in your sales process, even if it's with a current client, it's even better because you always have a project going on, so you can always get these dates and time. So you can discuss what's next. Make sure you're scheduling that. When you schedule that, you send a calendar invite for the date and time, and then you make sure it's accepted. If it's not accepted, the chances that it's not going to happen are pretty high. So one of the best ways to make sure that it's accepted, first of all, you set the date and time. And then if you don't already have your client's cell phone number, what you can say is, listen, we're going to do this by Zoom, and the technology can sometimes fail. So let's exchange cell phone numbers so we can communicate that way in case the technology fails. Here's mine. And then they'll typically give you theirs as well. You make sure the calendar invite is accepted. Right when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of technology failure. Now, not so much. But you can still say that to get their cell phone number. And that way you not only have their number, but now you also have permission to use their cell phone. You can use it to call them, of course. You can use them to text them, to ask for a 10-minute check-in call, like at the end of the day, to ask for 10 minutes to find out what's happening on your proposal, to find out what's happening with the approval, to find out what else they need in addition to what they asked you for. You can ask for that 10 minutes to get on the call. So a full meeting isn't always an appropriate next step, but a request for a 10-minute check-in call can be. So make sure that you're always scheduling a date and time, and get that cell phone number whenever possible. Pre-think the additional opportunities, and that you can do through the tool that I just showed you. At the end of a client conversation, you can then ask what else and who else. Your clients might be calling you in the middle of a project. When you're done answering their question, that's when you look on your wall, you see, oh, I need to ask for the introduction to Tom H., and then you can ask. That's one way to just fit it right into your workflow. When they're complimenting you, which I know they do, you can, at the end of the compliment, of course, you say thank you, and then ask them who else, either inside your company or outside your company, would also benefit from the kind of work we're doing. And if they don't know, that's where you look at your list. And you say, well, I know that brand A is doing this. And then you can go into the language that I gave you before. All business development activities should be high payoff activities, not just any activity, but a high payoff activity. So that means that your words and your activities are working hard for you at each point in the process. Because let's face it, there are a few people who truly, truly love the hunt, and other people are in this because they want to do the promotional products and the creativity. But in order to do that and to have more projects, all your business development activities need to be high payoff activities. What that also means is you want to minimize the amount of time you're spending on non-revenue generating activities, right? So if you're busy preparing reports for somebody internally, well, maybe that can be done by somebody else. Think about what you're doing. And I think we went through the NNR exercise. Actually, that's an article on my site as well. The NNR exercise. It is for 2 weeks, keep track of your time in quarter-hour increments. And for that period of time, specify what you're doing, and then write an N next to anything that's a non-revenue generating activity, and an R next to anything that is a revenue generating activity, and then add it all up. You're going to be surprised, right? Be seated when you actually review it. But what that does is gives you an opportunity to rethink how you're spending your time and increase R and decrease N wherever possible as it makes sense for you. Okay, so sometimes you just need a little bit of a different approach to business development, to working with your clients, to fit this in and make it easy. I promised you when I was done going through the tool and how to use that I was going to give you a series of efficiency ideas. So here we go. And here's my little Roadrunner vehicle or video so that we can talk about some efficiency ideas. Okay. The first efficiency idea is use the phone. I know it seems outdated and antiquated, but I'm here to tell you it works. I'm a decision maker in my company, and I don't know about you, but I get about 250 emails a day. I can't read them all. I can't. I see them, but I'll skip over anything that is not serious and urgent for me. So people who are trying to sell me things and they just send me email after email after email, I may never reply. But while those people are sending emails, very few people are also picking up the phone. But hey, I'm sitting right here at my desk. I'm stuck in this little Zoom box all day long. In fact, you know what I gave to my team for the holidays? I gave them a little mini refrigerator to keep on their desks because we can't get out of this little Zoom box. It's call after call after call. So while I'm sitting here, I have my cell phone right here, as most of you do, and people could call me on my cell phone. They can text me on my cell phone. They can send me an email and say, hey, I'm going to send you a text, and then I'll be on the lookout for the text. I could easily reply to a text. I might not be able to call them back, and I may never see their emails. So what I can tell you is working today, and there was this whole conversation on LinkedIn today about this very thing. What is working is conversation. So the more you can have conversations with your clients, the more sales you will close. And I don't know if you remember this picture of Tom Cruise from the Jerry Maguire movie. Do you guys remember what this whole thing was about? It was about show me the money. And that is what happens when you have a conversation, is that you can more easily access that. An email cannot replace a conversation. Here's the asking for 10 minutes that I just talked about before. So make sure to incorporate that into what you do. Now, avoid sending emails like this, please. If you are going to send emails, and we recommend email and phone in combination. Email alone doesn't do it. Phone alone doesn't do it. Email and phone in combination. Also, you can direct message somebody on LinkedIn. That will work as well, as long as it is a good message and it doesn't look like spam, which a lot of them do. Don't bother trying to read this email because your clients and your prospects won't either. It is way too long. You want a couple of sentences, maybe 1 to 2 sentences max, 2 to 3 paragraphs max. You can put your request in the first sentence. If you have a question, you can highlight it in yellow. So if they read nothing else, they've seen the yellow. How's Thursday at 10, for example, or if you want a meeting, ask for a meeting. Don't make your clients and your prospects work hard to figure out what you want from them. Make it easy. Your job is to make their lives easier. And one way you can do that is by sending an email that they can respond to quickly. They're usually just skimming. So make sure, sometimes I see people will send like 3 to 5 questions in an email. Well, people can't respond to all of that. Pick 1 or 2 that are most important. And if you have a lot, don't ask it in an email. Ask for a conversation, even if it's just 10 minutes. Okay, so what I'm going to share with you as another efficiency tip is to make sure you're being proactive with your language. You can be proactive with your language and get to the next step further, solidifying your next steps. And here's an example. So instead of just saying to somebody, oh, I'll call you next week with an answer, you could say, how's Thursday at 10? And I'll show you the information you wanted and we'll secure our next steps. Very proactive. Instead of I'll call you next week, how's Thursday at 10? Here's another one. Instead of saying, oh, I'll follow up with you in a couple of months to see if your needs have changed, you can say to them, what will be different in 3 months? You'll still be busy. Now remember, there's a formula when it comes to sales language. Language plus delivery equals outcome. Language plus delivery equals outcome. What you say and how you say it will determine the result. So you can say what will be different in 3 months and be a challenger and have somebody irritated with you. Or you could say, you're very busy. Let me take this off your plate. What's going to be different in 3 months? Do you see the difference? It could be the same sentence, the same question, but the delivery is very different. One is confrontational, and the other one is lighthearted and helpful. Go for the lighthearted and helpful. Remember not to give somebody a breakup email. Nobody likes those. Nobody likes to receive them. I'm not even sure why anybody recommends that, but sometimes people do. If you're giving your prospect a breakup email, they will likely break up with you. They'll say fine because they can get what they need elsewhere. So you want to make sure that you understand they're just people. They're people, they're flesh and blood. Like we said before, they go to work for a reason, and it's not to take your call. But even though they don't want to be sold, as we know, they do need to buy. They need to make sure that they complete what they need to complete for their work. Efficiency tip, another one. Track your progress and set tasks. Okay, I get it. It's no fun. It's annoying. But there's no way that if you have a lot of clients, you can possibly remember every single thing that someone told you. I remember years ago, when I was doing the door opening for the company. Now I run the company, and I don't get to do the door opening, which by far is my favorite thing. But there was a person at a pharmaceutical company, and that was before the pharma guidelines. But there was a person in the pharmaceutical company, and she's like, listen, there's really no reason for a meeting right now. We have a reorg going on. Pharma, that happens, right? So, and I believed her that there was a reorg going on. She said, call me in 6 months, and I want to have this conversation with you and set a meeting in 6 months, because by then the dust will settle and we'll know. So I said, all right, no problem. And then somehow we strayed into this conversation about how she had adopted an abused dog, and the dog had a fear of its water bowl. You can't make this stuff up. So I ended that conversation. I wrote all of my notes down. I set a task for myself 5.5 months out so that I was sure to have a conversation with her. Before I called her 5.5 months out, I reviewed my notes. I take very detailed notes, and I recommend you do too, and put them in a place where you can refer to them before you make the follow-up call. And so when you make the follow-up call, you can refer to anything that's in those notes. So I called her up, and her name was Laura. I said, Laura, it's Caryn Kopp. Remember me? And you told me to call you about now. But before we get into any business discussion, how is your dog doing with the water bowl? And there was a silence on the phone. And she said to me, I can't believe you remember that. That was, I don't know, 5 months ago. Well, we know it was 5.5 months ago, because I wrote it down and I referred to it before I picked up the phone. Well, my doing that moved our relationship forward in a way that never would have happened had I not referred to that information, had I not taken those notes. So make sure that you're taking detailed notes. And if you have a CRM, which I highly recommend, make sure it's in your CRM. If you don't have a CRM, you want to use an Excel spreadsheet and a calendar. That works too, but don't use nothing is my point, right? Track your progress, and then you're going to set a task. There should always be a date and time for a next step in your sales process. Even if it means that it's 5 months out on a Thursday at 10 o'clock, you're going to call Laura and find out how the reorg went. Because that way, 5.5 months out, there's no way I could have remembered that unless it came up in my task list. If you're using a CRM and you have your set task feature on, what's going to happen is on any given day, you're going to have a series of tasks. The next day, if you don't do them, you're going to have a set of overdue tasks. So what you want to make sure is monitor how many overdue tasks you have. If you have lots of overdue tasks and you have no time to get to them, there's a couple things you can think about. One is, does every prospect who's in your current group deserve your time and attention? Are they still A-level prospects? If so, you need to keep them in your rotation. 2, are you spending time on non-revenue generating activities? And maybe you can eliminate those or give those to someone else so that you increase the capacity that you have in order to make sure that you're constantly following up. There are 3 P's of prospect follow-up: persistence, with patience, without being a pest. So you want to make sure that you're following up in a tight enough cadence that they remember the conversation they had with you. And when the money's on the table, you're going to be there to collect. If you don't follow up in a tight enough cadence, that means there's lots of space in between the time they spoke with you or heard from you to the time you follow up. That lays the foundation for your competition to come in and eat your lunch. So why do that? If you're spending the time on business development, keep your cadence tight, set your tasks so you don't have to remember everything, and definitely take detailed notes and refer to them. Okay, a couple more efficiencies. Let's put this in here. Objections. I like P's. So there are 3 P's with follow-up. There's also 3 P's with objections. And those are pre-think, prepare, and practice. If you can pre-think the objections that you're going to get, like remember Tom from my example with the fillable form? Well, he was concerned originally that his prospect wouldn't say yes to the extra 1,000 for each of the 2 additional walkathons because of warehousing, and then realized that they could do the warehousing. So he pre-thought that objection, he prepared the answer, and then the next is to practice. So pre-think and prepare, just knowing the answer for the objection is not enough. You need to be able to come out with it in a performance moment so it doesn't trip you up and become a roadblock. We talked a lot about, I don't have a budget for that, so I don't think we need to go back over that again. I'm swamped for the next month with other initiatives. You can have a variety of responses for that. You can say, well, what will be different in 3 months? You could say, let's not let that be a roadblock. Let's go ahead and have the conversation so you have the information you need for when you surface, and then we can have a more detailed conversation later. How's Thursday at 10? I already have a vendor for that, thanks anyway. I don't really know why that trips people up, because if a prospect or a client has a need, they have a vendor. They have to. Otherwise, how are they going to get their work done? So we should just anticipate that that's going to happen. So you can use, let's not let that be a roadblock. You never know where a good idea is going to come from. We just did a couple of projects that I think you're really going to be interested in hearing because they'll be valuable for you. Let's set a time to talk. How's Thursday at 10? So I really like the language. Let's not let that be a roadblock. It often removes anything that is a roadblock from your path, but then the sentence you have that comes right after, let's not let that be a roadblock, has to be a good one. And then you're going to ask for the date and time. We talked a little bit about next step, date and time. If anybody who knows me knows my mantra is date and time, date and time, date and time. There's always a date and time for a next step in the sales process I talked about. This staircase is actually in a client's office. When I first met them, they had 1 floor. And then as their sales grew and grew and grew because of some of these very simple strategies and ideas that we talked about today, they were able to add a 2nd floor to their office building, and the sales team sat at the top of this staircase. And when I went to visit last time I was there, I said, hey, why don't you put next step, date, and time right on the staircase to remind them every single time they go to their desks that they need to ask for a next step, date, and time. And so a couple days later, I received this picture from my client. So they take this very seriously, next step, date, and time. And they also take very seriously revenue generating activities versus non-revenue generating activities. And actually, when they have their group sales meetings, I don't know what the cadence is. It might be once a month. It might be once a quarter. They have an N&R conversation. And as a group, they try to figure out what can they do as a group to reduce N in favor of R. Less non-revenue generating activities leads to more revenue generating activities. They're very, very serious about that. So I want to give you some ways to measure how your success is going, so that if it's not the success you want, you can make changes. I call them leading indicator KPIs. A KPI is a key performance indicator, but I actually like to judge the leading indicator KPIs, because when you know if you know you're off track, you have the ability to diagnose why that's happening and make changes so that you can get to the KPIs, key performance indicators, that you truly want. So here are a few of them. The percent of deals, closed deals, which are the right deals. One of our core values in my company is to create important wins for our clients, not just any win, the important wins. So when we talked last time a year ago and the pandemic had just hit, a lot of the definitions for what was an important win had changed from before the pandemic hit. And now all of a sudden people, before we started going after the masks and things like that, it was, where can I get any cash, any closed sale? Now we're a year and several months later, it's time to redefine important win for yourself as well. And then judge what percentage of the deals you're closing are the right kinds of deals. And that's true even of your clients. The live conversations, that's important. Let's define them. Are they live conversations with the decision maker? Are they live conversations with an assistant? We don't track live conversations that are scheduling conversations, like how's Thursday at 10, no Friday at 2. We don't track that. We're just tracking the meaty ones, because the more meaty conversations you have, the more sales you will close. The percent of time you're facing each objection. Nobody usually tracks this, and but we do, because it's really important. If you have a situation where, let's say, a very high percentage of the time your clients are referring you to other people within their organization, the other people are saying, I already have a vendor for that, thanks anyway, and you can't get past that, it's time to take a look at that objection response and have a stronger response. You don't want any one objection to keep preventing you from getting to the next step. So be careful of that and track them. You can do that in your CRM. Open tasks we talked about, calls and emails, yes, but define them, right? It's not just is it Friday at 2 or Thursday at 10, but the meaty emails, the ones that are important where you're suggesting new ideas. Number of meetings set, and define what a meeting is. It's not just a quick hello, but it's a meeting where you're suggesting something else according to the chart that we just reviewed. The percent of first meetings which go to second meetings. This is true when you're asking that who else, and your client connects you with the next person and you have that first meeting with the next person. You want to make sure that a very high percentage of those first meetings go to second meetings. If they don't, you likely have one of three problems. One is that they were never the right prospect to begin with for you, even though your client referred you to them internally or externally. You might not have set up enough value during the meeting for the prospect to feel that a next meeting made sense, or you might not have asked for a date and time for the next meeting. And that's usually the big offender. People who don't get second meetings after a good first meeting will usually, the result is usually because they didn't ask for another meeting. And we already talked about the percent of time spent on non-revenue generating activities. So from a diagnostic standpoint, and to figure out, like, once you've had a first meeting and a second meeting and a third meeting with a client or somebody your client has referred you to, and they're not buying, it's time to ask yourself some questions and do some self-reflection. Are they just not buying at all? Like, that individual, that company, they're just not buying anything. So now it's a waiting game because maybe they'll need something later. Or are they not buying from you? Right? Those are two very different things. And the path that you follow is going to be different depending on the answer to that question. So this is self-reflection. Are they not buying at all? Are they not buying from you? Or did you just not follow up? And that happens more often than we want it to. So be careful that your cadence is tight, you're keeping track of your tasks, you're maximizing your revenue generating activities, and that you have that fillable form printed and on your wall. So let me ask you this, and I'm going to ask you to write it down. What action step, and I'll even go so far as to say one, what one action step are you going to take from what you learned today? Whether it's filling the form for just one of your clients, which I asked you to do, or it's one of these other steps, what one action step will you take from today's session to accelerate sales so that you can capture your world of opportunity? Remember to link in with me. You can always ask me questions that way if you want. So here's some of the information. You can reach me through my website and ask questions, or on my website, there's lots of articles that you can go to on the blog. I write usually about narrow subject areas of challenge, and you can get the high gain questions there, the NNR exercise there, it's all there. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and take some questions.
Great, thanks, Caryn. I mean, so much there, and I love the, what else, who else, what's the big idea, language plus delivery equals outcome. I mean, there's so many things. I just
we were taking notes.
I don't know. Those are things I could process very easily. So I love those. I have just a few questions here. So
Sure.
What tips do you have for times when prospects just generally go silent? It happens all the time.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And first of all, there are ways to prevent it. And then there are ways to deal with it when it happens. And in fact, and of course, I'm going to tell you how to prevent it first, and then we'll go into how to deal with it. But one time after I told somebody, or a group of people, how to deal with it, somebody went and did what I told them to do. And he wrote me back and he's like, I just closed a big sale. And it was all because of this one tip. But it's really important to try very hard not to get yourself into a situation of silence in the first place, mostly from an efficiency standpoint, because it's a pain in the neck and it's very time consuming to have to chase somebody, right? And usually the reason why people have to chase somebody is because they didn't set a date and time in the first place. So like I have people say to me, well, after I talked to the prospect, the prospect said, I have to go ask Tom, Dick, and Sally to be in the meeting too. And I don't have their calendars, right? That happens all the time. I don't have their calendars. So I'll call you back next week and I'll let you know, or I'll send you an email next week with the times that work. So how many times has it happened to you that you say, oh, okay. And then next week comes and goes. And then the week after comes and goes. And now you have to start chasing them for this date and time. So here's one of the things you could do to prevent that. You can say to them, do you have a staff meeting weekly where you're going to see these people? If so, can you add me to the agenda for 20 minutes? A lot of times they can do that. If they're talking to you and they want to take next steps with you, this is the time to ask a question like that because it's most important to them. A day later, 2 days later, it's not quite as important to them as the time they said yes to the next step. So that's one thing you can do. And then if they say, no, we don't have a staff meeting, I'm not going to see them, and we don't have a common assistant, you can ask that too. And then you say, no problem, let's do this. Let's put a check-in call on the calendar for a week from today. And if we haven't heard back, then perhaps you'll have dates by then, and that'll keep us moving. How's Thursday at 10 o'clock for you for 10 minutes? Usually people will say yes to that 10-minute check-in call. They want to keep things moving too. But if for some reason they are still silent, right, and you've done my tips and they're still silent, what do you do? And what do you do for the people who went silent before you heard me talk today? Is a couple things. One is you can send them an email and say, why the silence? We talked about having a follow-up meeting and we're having some trouble getting it on the calendar. What's the reason for your silence? Please share. All right. So not is there a reason? We don't like the yes, no questions, but what's the reason for your silence? So you can say that. Usually it's because they're busy. 9 times out of 10, people are just busy. So if it doesn't go on the calendar the first time around, getting it back on the calendar is really difficult. I mean, I don't know about you, Chris, but I come in on a Monday morning. I mean, this is my first day back from vacation, right? So I look at my calendar and I just want to cry. Like there's not space in there at all to even get up and go refill my coffee cup. So that's what people's schedules are like. And even with the best of intentions, which many people have, it's not that they're ignoring you. They simply don't have another minute in a day to make that call. So the next one, that's a great one, which usually gets a response within 48 hours is, are you okay? Now listen, you can only use this once.
Yes,
so
one shot deal, yeah.
One shot deal. So do the other things first, and then you can say, are you okay in the subject line? And in the body, you say, no problem if you're not ready to continue our discussion, but I was just concerned for you and wanted to check in and see if you were okay. That usually gets gee, I'm so sorry, I've been very busy, to which you can reply and say, it's no problem, I totally understand, we get like that too. How's 2 weeks out, Thursday at 10? And that will usually go right on the calendar. A long answer to a short question.
No, it's a fantastic answer. And, speaking of busy, our sales teams are so busy meeting, all these tight deadlines. So it can be difficult for them to find that time to fit in the extra business development. What ideas do you have for them which might help?
You're right. So it is hard. It's very hard to find time in the day. There's like not another minute. So one of the things you could do is put a block of time on your calendar and consider it as firm as a meeting with the prospect you've been trying to get a meeting with for the last 5 years. Don't take it off your calendar, because this is your future pipeline. This is what you're there for, is to serve other clients. So keep that firm, that time period, even if it's a small time period, then you're going to need to set priority. Other than that, print out that fillable form, because like we said, the easiest way to grow your sales quickly is by growing them with your current clients. So print out that form, put it on your wall, and every time you're on the phone with the client, your eyes are going to go right to the wall. You finish your conversation and ask what else, who else, and be prepared with that big idea. Easiest way to do this.
So there's, the phrase, all advertising is good advertising, but all referrals are not good referrals. So how do we make sure that when clients and, centers of influence refer us, that they refer us to the right kind of prospects? What ideas do you have there?
Great question. So another Jerry Maguire reference, help them help you. Tell people who the kinds of clients are who are really going to value what you do, who you can serve best. If the people who are going to refer you know, they can direct you to the right people. If you don't tell them, they're just going to refer you to anybody and think they did you a huge favor, right? So be careful about that. How do you identify who those people are? Well, you might remember from last year, we had that Venn diagram with those the ultimate Venn diagram with who's going to find you to be an obvious solution, who will willingly pay what you want to charge for your products and your services, who will feel urgency around moving forward. Are they going to be the kind of client that you want? And if the answer to that is yes, it's a good referral. If the answer to that is no, then it's not a good referral. And if the answer is you don't know, you should pursue the path, because sometimes things just surprise you, and where you don't think that there's an opportunity, there could be an enormous opportunity. So be careful about a false negative there.
Great. Caryn, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. You've provided just a number of great takeaways that I think all of us can implement, even in this coming week. So thank you very much for being with us at Galleria in 2021. Thank you.